Okay, guys, I'm ready.
But it's a big tune for sure. I actually wrote that originally for Tina Turner.
Of course, I had gone and found Joni Mitchell down in Florida and brought her back.
I've listened to a few of them and they've been really good, man. I'm sitting in the back of the car coming into London. They're brilliant.
Thank you guys for still being around, still making music, still being into it, and doing this podcast. It's fabulous.
Well, I get the feeling that us three should go for a pint. That's what I think.
I'm in a band now. It's called Roxy Music.
You know this thing about the 10,000 hours of experience?
Oh, yeah,
get good at something. When we recorded Arnold Lane, we'd done about 50 hours.
The Rockonteurs podcast with Gary Kemp and Guy Pratt.
Keep on rocking!
Right, hello Gary.
Hello Guy.
Now, this is a special little episode of the Rockonteurs because this week obviously marks an incredible milestone, an unbelievably important anniversary in the history of music. But we're not talking about Dark Side of the Moon.
Oh my God, he's a scriptwriter.
But no, it's the 40th anniversary of True, Gary. And what's, unfortunately, for our listeners, that you are the Bill Frindle of this show, and I'm talking to you, and it's a bit much to ask you for all the facts and figures about your own record, because then you'll just sound a bit weird, won't you?
It is, and I've no idea how many it's sold, but there's a couple of little figures that I like, but I don't.
I remember you going and getting an ASCAP award for something like 600 million plays in America.
No, it's not quite that. It's over 5 million plays on that song, True, right. Which is a lot, actually. People go, oh, there's a billion play streams on and things like that nowadays, but that's radio play in America.
But that's also because it's one of the most sampled records ever, isn't it? I mean, you've had so many.
Yes, I've been asked, and I get asked to give more samples as I get older, I find.
But I want to say something about the truth. Is I remember coming to see the first Spandau reunion, and I came to see you at the O2. And in fact, I came with our good friend Steve McLaughlin, because he used to be in a New Romantic band, so it was perfect. And actually, I've got to share this one little gag, which is we got the water bus up the Thames.
Yeah.
It's one for the Spandau fans. And as the boat docked, Steve said, "Arrived at glory."
Anyway, as in Journeys to Glory.
Yes, exactly. I would say one for the Spandau fans there.
Yes, yeah.
But the guest seats at the O2 are stage left. And as well as affording you a great view of the stage, they also afford you a great view of the audience. And I just remember when you played True, that everyone's got their phones up and everyone looking at everyone and just thinking, oh my God, my mate wrote essentially the My Way or the Imagine of his generation. Because that's what that song is.
Oh.
That's what that song is, Gary.
I don't know why. It's funny, the connection with My Way as well, because My Way was the lyrics were written by Paul Anka. And Paul Anka covered True.
That's right.
About 10 years ago on an album he did.
And he substituted Ella for Marvin.
Yeah, listening to Ella. Yeah, right, that bit. I don't know what it is about the tune that actually gets people so worked up, in a good way. I mean, wedding songs and whatever it might be. I remember doing The Bodyguard and filming that, and Kevin Costner saying to me, that song belongs to me and my wife. And but
what do you say? No, it doesn't actually.
No, because taxi drivers say the same thing to me, or my plumber. But anyway, they got divorced, so much for that. Yeah, and listen, I think we're talking about the album mostly here, which is 4th of March.
I've only prepped the song. I've actually prepped the song. It was the song I was. No, it's a fabulous album,
Yeah, well,
and of course, this was very much a zeitgeisty thing of going to the Bahamas, wasn't it?
To talk from how it developed really from the beginning, and the Bahamas was a choice, certainly, to go to Nassau, because the Nassau Compass Point Studios, and I'm sure you've been there, Guy, right?
No, I've been there around that just after. In fact, I remember Robert Palmer telling me about you being there.
Yeah, because Robert was on Island.
Robert lived right next to the studio.
And Chris Blackwell from Island Records owned the Nassau Compass Point studio, and of course famous for the Compass Point All Stars, right?
That's right. But also, I mean, because around that period that you worked there, it was literally everyone. I mean, it kind of started with Nightclubbing, the Grace Jones record, and from then, and within the year that you were there, there was Talking Heads, there was AC/DC, everyone was Dire Straits, everyone from every
AC/DC.
Dire Straits didn't go there.
AC/DC. I can't think of a more wrong band to be in Compass Point, Nassau. I mean, they're literally it's the most chilled out place you'll ever go to. I don't know. Maybe I've got them wrong, but it doesn't seem like that music, because I certainly we all felt inspired by the place, and I think we had a certain set of songs that to use the phrase that was quite cool in those days, Blue-Eyed Soul. It seemed like a good place to go and find the energy of that space to infiltrate our music. Because before then, I mean, Spandau was such a London band. We'd only ever recorded at London, at Trident or at Townhouse or, Utopia, and everything we did was about London clubs and the London scene. And there was such a change in my songwriting after the Diamond album and chart number 1, into something much more soulful. And I can tell you how that sort of became how I felt inspired to do that. That it seemed to make sense to get out of London and try and become a global group, because up until then we'd only really sold songs in UK and Europe.
But everything was very much going that way, wasn't it? I know as a player, that's where everyone was at. It was very much about black music, and because you've made a point before, how you said that the thing with how in the Inky press, the NME and everything like that sort of black music was blues and reggae, well, reggae essentially, and there was a lot of African music happening at that time, and it was you had this thing that soul was sort of looked down on as being aspirational, and so you were doing that. But that's why I find it, what is quite interesting though, is so you were looking for a soul reference, right? And so you use Marvin Gaye, who of course at that point had just put out Sexual Healing, which we all lost our minds over, didn't we?
Yeah,
remember?
cool.
So he was, but what's quite funny is using him as a reference is that this is the guy who did What's Going On, who invented conscious soul. So it's actually still an incredibly credible. It's like you didn't say listening to Barry all night long, did you?
No, or Junior. Marvin was a good choice, but I think it was, there was some circumstances that got me to listen to that music. I'd become quite good friends with the guys from Altered Images and found myself going up to Glasgow and hanging out with them quite a bit, and Claire and Jerry and their manager. And they were massive fans of Marvin Gaye and that music. And I'd always been, I'd had What's Going On, and I had Let's Get It On. Those albums were big for me in the 70s, in the mid 70s, and who wouldn't love those records? But they were playing it a lot in the car, and I just recorded Diamond, which has got, its funk side, but it's got this really tricky prog rock side to it as well, which is bizarre. And I remember playing
Brave, I think it's the
Brave, and I remember playing Brave, but probably Unfulfilled. I remember playing that as a cassette of that in their car and thinking, I'm on the wrong tip here. I just don't want to do this music. I want to go back. And so I lived at home with mum and dad at the time. And I had this Echo guitar, which sits behind me.
Have you dressed the set?
No,
have you dressed the set for us? Gary?
It's right there. The Echo guitar, Echo brand. I'm not sure where they're made. I think it's like Norway.
I think they're Japanese, aren't they? Oh, no, Echo sounds like that. I don't know.
And
we'll get emails.
Anyway, I literally lived at home in a council house with mum and dad. I'd had 2 records out. I'd been on Top of the Pops half a dozen times. And we couldn't afford to move out. And I just remember writing these songs, a bunch of songs that had a very different feel to them, and, Gold and Lifeline and Communication, and showing my brother them in the bedroom. And he was getting very excited about it, thinking this is like, this is fantastic, it's going to be really change the landscape for us, because I don't think people are expecting it. And it seemed to us that the person to get on board to produce this at the time was someone who just landed the ABC record, right? And the Dollar record, and no, was it Dollar?
Of course.
And Trevor Horn.
Yeah.
So the first bunch of rehearsals we did on what was then called the Pleasure Project, because Pleasure was one of the first songs I came up with on that album, had Trevor Horn producing. And do you know this story? I've told it.
No, I don't. I've heard it from. I've heard a version from Trevor.
So Trevor came down to Utopia, to Nomis, where we were rehearsing these songs. I don't think I had True at the time. Well, certainly Trevor doesn't remember me having True, but it was going to be the True album in the end. And he routined the song Pleasure. In fact, it was his idea to do a 7/8 bar at the end of the song. right?
Of course it was.
And we went to Air Studios to record it, and I we did a first day recording there with the drums with John Keeble, and Dagger gets a call that night from Jill, Trevor's wife and manager, saying Trevor's really worried about this. He doesn't think John is going to suit this record, and he only wants to continue if you get rid of John and either put a drum machine on the record or we get a new drummer in. And I think it was very Trevor, that, you know, but it wasn't very.
Yeah, which is funny because he is like that and he's not like that, because he kind of cares about the integrity of a band. So I think now he wouldn't have said that. He would have looked at making it work.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
So Dagger's phoned me and we said, look, there's no way we're going to get rid of John. John's easily good enough. He's a great drummer, but he's just.
Yeah, he is.
I think Trevor just wanted to sort of lay his mark on this.
His imprint, yeah.
Confidence in it. And so we were sort of floundering after that. And that's when we got the idea to have a chat with Swain and Jolly, who had been doing these tracks for Imagination, which were kind of electro soul, right?
Yeah, with that fabulous bass synth, which you obviously got from them.
Yeah, which is what.
And Alison Moyet, they did those fantastic Alison Moyet records. Was that after you or before?
I think I don't know. I think it could have been just before us. They did Bananarama. Do you remember?
That's right. Yeah.
Bananarama songs. So we thought they were quite good commercial producers, because we'd sort of fallen out with Richard Burgess a bit, really, because neither of us felt that the Diamond album was perfect. And
well, it's also part of the broadening horizon thing, isn't it?
Yeah, it was. And I love that bass synth on Imagination. I had this song True, and I know that Tony and Steve Jolly and Tony Swain came down to watch us rehearse that, and I thought it would be good when we were in the studio eventually. We love that synth sound, and is there, maybe the synth bass could be on the record. Martin didn't seem to mind, so we gave anyway. The first thing we recorded was Lifeline. We picked that out as being the first potential single, and we went into Red Bus. Did you ever go to Red Bus?
I went to Red Bus. Yeah, I worked there quite a lot.
Listen Grove.
Yeah. Listen Grove. Yeah. By the antique market, Church Street Antiques Market.
That's right. Who did you record there?
Mate, I can't remember. The 80s,
Straight from a club.
Yeah. But what I want to ask, but the thing with True, was it just a succession of oh my gods, right? You come up with this thing, you go, oh my god. You play it to Martin, right? He was the first person you played it to.
Yeah.
And
the song and the album, right? Or the song.
No, well, I want to get to the song, Gary, because this is, I know obviously the album's special to you.
Sure.
It's But was it like you play it to Martin, he goes, oh my God. Then who would have been the next person you played it to? The band or Steve, Dagger? And then it's just, oh my God. And then then Swain and Jolly hear it, they go, oh my God. Was it just a succession of
Tony
all the way down?
Tony says he never thought it was a single, right? So there was no oh my God from Tony. I definitely felt oh my God. And I remember writing it. And obviously there were some, we'll get Claire on, I'm sure. We'll get Claire on. She said she wants to come on. Claire Grove.
Yeah, because there's the lyrical thing, isn't there? There's lines that you've picked out of Lolita because that was the book that she gave you.
Yeah.
Right. Seaside Arms, and it's Seaside Limbs in the book.
Yes, exactly. And
that's where Pill on My Tongue comes up, because I was thinking, because you've talked about the pill being nerves that dissolve.
Yeah.
Because it's quite funny. I was thinking, if that song had been written 3 years later, Pill on My Tongue would have only have meant one thing. It would have been oos.
Yeah, with a thrill in my head and a pill on my tongue. Yeah, I think those lines are based a bit on Nabokov. Beautifully pretentious, but a little message really for her, I suppose, at the time. We were having a sort of platonic relationship. It just felt right for it to be platonic, and that's what it was. And I wrote those lines. Why do I find it hard to write the next line when I want the truth to be said? Was really a songwriter saying, I just want to say, you've inspired me to do this, but I can't really be too truthful.
Well, it's actually because, of course, in the 80s, we're all big on postmodernism, and it's actually a fantastically postmodern thing to do, is to write a love song about how you can't write a love song. Do you know what I mean? Or you can write love, or it's the act of writing the song, it becomes the song.
Yeah, so there was lots of that. The oh my God moments, I think, yes, Tony Swain and Steve Jolly recognised it as being a really good tune. But the real oh my God actually came when we were in Nassau itself, and there is video footage of this that my brother took. I think it's Martin, where we'd recorded the sort of the drums and the bass, and we'd put some keys down, and then I did the guitar, and then they like chink chink, which was obviously meant to be, but.
That's the one kind of muso point I want to bring up is that guitar, which is how the hell did you manage to do that without going ching ching ching? There's literally nothing between the chords.
No.
I mean, either someone actually edited them all out, or that's literally like some Nietzschean exercise in the will.
I was feeling it, man. I was a soul boy. I was in the groove, and I don't know, but it was definitely something I got from a Motown record, and numerous Motown records. Probably it was a trick that they'd done, putting that on the snare and the and later, whatever it is, wherever the groove.
Check for one. Check. It's actually on 2 and 4. It's on the snare beat.
Yeah, so it was definitely a Motown thing. But when I did the backing vocals, and we tracked up the backing vocals, and we had this little effect we did. In those days, you used to have to. We were recording with Dolby, made famous.
Dolby,
Final Tap, and which took all the noise out. And what happened is it muffles it, and then it goes back.
Yeah, it takes the top off. Yeah.
Goes back through another sort of thing that puts all the top back on, but without the hiss. So what if you do though? If you leave it off but record with it, you get this lovely airy sound, this kind of really top high end sound. And we did that as an effect on the backing vocals. And anyway, there's a bit of footage where we're all sitting in the control room in Nassau, and everybody, all the road crews come in, and everybody's just singing along to this. And you can see we're just so joyful. We're so happy. It's like, this is special.
Well, no, absolutely. I mean, it's also, oh, by the way, because that backing vocal thing, I mean, that is, let's face it, that's a nod to 10cc, isn't it?
Well, the way it was recorded was a nod to 10cc.
Probably not consciously at the time, but you're basically employing the same technique they used.
But I remember when I wrote it, what inspired me, I remember the exact thing that inspired me. Now, obviously, there's some elements of Al Green in that whole chord sequence, bits of that. But what inspired me was I was at home, and for some reason, Let It Be was on TV. Now, there was a moment when Paul McCartney let that movie out, right? So this is 1982, and Let It Be was on television, and I was watching it, and Dig a Pony, John sings Dig a Pony, hi, 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 dig a pony. And I love that way he took one simple word, and he snaked it around melodically.
Yeah.
And that's where I end up with hi, 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 which is obviously the word I. I know this much is true. And it was totally from John. So that's a direct baton passing from the Beatles.
Brilliant. But it is so ubiquitous. I would say, definitely in America, I have heard that song just in daily life more than any other song I've ever heard. Either from one of the samples or everything, even the Paul Anka version, anything. I've never spent a day, I don't think, in America without going into a shop or going in somewhere and not hearing it.
Yeah, I don't know why. What happened is it got played on Black Radio 2, which is not Radio 2. There isn't a Black Radio 2. Could one imagine, right? It got played on Black Radio also in America. And to make that crossover was, that was a big thing. People, we did Soul Train with the record. And there had only been a few other artists.
There must have been echoes of Bowie for you there.
Oh, my God. Bowie was very close to me on this record, because not only did Bowie was one of the few white people, and Elton John, and I think Daryl Hall all played Soul Train. They were like the three only white bands that had ever played Soul Train. And then, because we then did it. And I remember it was funny because I've forgotten the guy. He's not who used to present Soul Train. He's dead now, black guy. And he interviewed us at the end of the song. He went, "You guys all look alike." He said, "Are you brothers?" Obviously, he could tell the difference. But
Fantastic.
I know. But it was a fantastic.
And of course, you had that fantastically cinematic video, beautiful, posh split screen.
Yeah, that was Russell Mulcahy, of course, who invented.
Yeah, Russell Mulcahy, of course.
Invented a.
Chris Sullivan's suits. Was that Chris Sullivan?
They were Chris. We got sort of a bit berated for the suits, but I think people,
they're they're quite Teddy Boy, weren't they?
Yeah, but they were meant to be like gambling cowboys. This is what Chris Sullivan was, an ace face in Soho, and was a kind of part-time designer, part-time artist himself.
Well, he's the man who brought the zoot suit to the club scene,
and he
wasn't he? Yeah.
created Blue Rondo a la Turk.
Yeah.
And he came up with those designs, and that's what they were meant to be. And it was a little tailor in Kentish Town who knocked them up. They all had our names inside, and they were fantastic.
Have you still got it?
No,
have you still got
I don't know why, but I don't have it, and I don't know. Yeah, I mean, it's quite tragic. Anyway, carrying on with Bowie is why reason.
Sorry.
Obviously, Bowie being so dear to my heart, we knocked Bowie off of number one with that song in the UK. So Bowie was at number one with Let's Dance, and yes,
was that bittersweet? Were you kind of thinking, oh, couldn't it be someone else?
Yeah.
Or was it just like, come on?
Oh, I felt good about that.
Yeah, of course you did.
Do you know what? The other thing, when it went to number one on that day, I remember where I was. We were in Sheffield. We'd done a gig the night before in Sheffield City Hall, and then we got called in the morning. So it would have been a Tuesday. No, that would have been a Tuesday, maybe. Yeah, because we got the charts in advance. Maybe, I don't know. Anyway, and I remember just all running. I was sharing a room with John Keeble and going down to Hadley's room and banging on his room. He shared a room with a roadie for some reason, and banging on his door and bursting in. And Tony, who's massive, right, 6'4", jumping on the bed. And I just started to really worry that he would injure himself on the ceiling because we had a gig that night in Nottingham. And so we went to Nottingham, and of course it was a really celebratory gig. So our record had just gone to number one, and Steve Strange came up with a few old Blitz kids to spend the night with us in celebration. And next door, this place in Nottingham, we've played there, you and I. It's got another theatre on the other side.
Oh yes, next to yes.
So there's two theatres. Playing next door was with a comedian. What's his name? Nick.
Jim Davidson.
Jim Davidson, right? So none more old school, right?
Yeah.
And
none more Tory.
So the party afterwards not only had Jim Davidson at it, but it had Les Dawson arrived at the party. Both of them trolleyed. Completely trolleyed. I mean, more trolleyed than any rock star that would ever have turned up. More available for fun, put it that way, than anyone I've ever seen at a rock party.
Superb.
So it was quite a night.
Well, it's not because I was your label mate at the time at Christie. I was in Icehouse, who were also signed to Christie. And I remember just, you go into the office and people were losing their minds. So it was fabulous.
Over the record?
Yeah. Over the record.
Obviously it did change. It changed everyone's lives, of course, because then, all part of that whole British invasion, Duran coming with their album, and Rio was their sort of equivalent. And I remember funnily enough, I remember when we had a party because after we did the 1000th Top of the Pops and we were number one. And there was a great sense of irony about it because Richard Branson had paid for the party, and it was a big party in some a roof garden that he used.
Kensington Roof Gardens.
Yes. And he had paid for it because he had been convinced that Fascination and Human League was going to go to number one that week and was going to be the number one on the 1000th Top of the Pops. And it didn't. We stayed at number one. So I remember going to the party and he was there, and through gritted teeth, he was sort of like paying the bar bill.
So yeah, obviously, Gary, it's been in every TV show ever, right? Modern Family, The Wedding Singer, The Simpsons.
Well, it's been Simpsons 3 times now. I don't know why 3 times, but it has. And I know I think Maggie played a sax on it as well at one point. And
oh, that's right, she did. And actually, can I say, by the way, a big shout out for Steve Norman, who had literally just learnt the sax.
Absolutely, right? 100%. I mean, this is what we have to say about this. You're talking to the writer, obviously, and I'm all full of writing stories. But Tony approaching a song like this, he'd never sang like this. This is if those first 2 albums were very sort of Bowie Heroes period. and dark, and now he was trying to approach soul. And I think, the songs were also pushing him in a slightly different direction. And of course, where do we look for inspiration? We look to Bowie and Young Americans, don't we? That's...
Although I would say for this one, the fact that Tony was a massive Sinatra man.
He was.
And I think that comes into play here.
Yeah, no, absolutely right. And of course, Steve had only just started playing sax. You're right. And, he only picked the sax up because...
And I must say, and the song does feature a magnificent key change, which is done specifically for the ease of sax playing. Because it's written in G, right? It's written in the natural key you'd write it for the guitar. Yeah. And then it goes to E flat, which is the last key anyone except for Brian Ferry ever writes in.
I've no idea. I did that. I did
well,
that.
It's E flat. It's the perfect sax key.
Didn't know that, but I did it as a kind of key change. And I went, here we go. Here's the key change. There'll be a solo over this. It felt right to me. I didn't realize that happens to be a great sax key.
But that's not a pop key change, Gary. That's a musical theatre key change.
Yeah, maybe that was
showing you West End Wendy.
But Steve certainly pulled out a gem of a sax solo that we all love to this day. And the Modern getting on Modern Family was a big buzz, and that was a funny one because obviously we know that the scene goes that she, the wife, the True is very important for them, and on their 10th wedding anniversary, she gets one of the band members of Spandau Ballet to come along and sing the True to them in their living room, and of course when he turns up, it's Ed Norton.
It's Edward Norton, yeah,
and he's playing someone called. A name that I'd never heard before. And she goes, you're not the bass player from Spandau Ballet. And he says, no, I'm the one between Richard Miller and Martin Kemp, which was incredible because Richard Miller was our bass player at school.
That's right.
Spandau Ballet. I mean, I know you love those writing room nerds in America.
Yeah, absolutely.
Anyway, thanks for putting up with me. I'm sure I'm not the best guest you've ever had, but this is an in-betweenie.
You're not the worst.
That's nice to know. Will you play my Christmas single?
Constantly.
Thanks, guys. We're on with someone very special this weekend.
Oh man, we've got a great one coming this Sunday. Yes.
Thanks for putting.
Not that this wasn't.
So, 40th celebrations of the True album today.
Yeah, there you go.
Thank you. Who would have thought?
Many
40 years. I thought I'd be dead. Not talking to you on a podcast. Who would have even known what a podcast was?
Exactly. Or who I was.
Unfortunately, I still know you.
All right. We'll see you on Sunday. It's good night from me.
Good night from them.
Rockonteurs is produced by Gimme Sugar Productions for Warner Music Group UK.